Imagine being the most dangerous thing in the room and not knowing it. Imagine carrying 1,000 years of memory in a body that never ages. Walking through towns that have risen and fallen and risen again in the time it took you to decide what to eat for breakfast. Imagine looking at a bronze statue of a hero and feeling something ancient crack open behind your ribs. Not grief, exactly, but the particular, suffocating weight of a person who outlived every single thing they ever loved. That is Frieren in the opening minutes of Season 2. Not hunched under the pressure of it, not crying, just present, watching. And that stillness, that total unnerving composure is the most psychologically disturbing thing about her. The celebration of the first-class mage exam has faded. The city of oysters shrinks behind the carriage. The northern plateau stretches ahead vast and indifferent, the kind of landscape that reminds small creatures how small they are. For Fern and Stark, this is the frontier, the edge of the known world. For Frieren, this is a road she last walked with people who have been dead for decades, and her face betrays nothing. They arrive in a village where an old man has a job for them, polish a statue. It sounds like nothing. It plays like a trap door opening beneath your feet. Because the statue isn't Himmel, Frieren isn't surprised. She calmly explains that Himmel wasn't the only hero of that war. The hero of the South was every bit his equal in these parts, a dual-wielding warrior who fought the Demon King's 7 sages alone, killed 3 of them, and died knowing he would. He had the ability to see the future. He saw exactly how and when he would fall. He walked forward anyway, because he also saw that clearing the path for Himmel's party was the only thing that would matter in the end. The implication sits in the air like smoke. If a man who could see his own death still chose to move toward it for the sake of people he'd never meet, what does heroism actually mean? What does it cost? The episode doesn't linger on that question. It sets it quietly in the back of your mind and moves on. What it moves toward is darker. A nobleman named Count Doc invites the party to dinner, a pleasantry that Frieren immediately reads as a transaction, because the Count's great-grandfather made the same play on her last visit with Himmel's party. Sure enough, a family heirloom sword has been stolen. Again, a demon took it decades ago too. It's an ancient blade that originally belonged to demonkind, and something about it keeps drawing them back. The party is asked to retrieve it. They track the thief to a destroyed village, rubble still smoking, every building collapsed. The silence of a place where people used to live is a specific kind of silence. And this show knows exactly how to weaponize it. And then, in the middle of the ruin, a figure in a traveling priest cloak. She says she's come to mourn the dead. Her voice is soft. Her posture is humble. Stark and Fern, raised with a reverence for those who attend the dead, feel themselves being pulled toward deference. Frieren does not, because there are no graves. A priest comes to mourn the dead, and there are no bodies buried anywhere in this village. The demon has been killing and leaving no ceremony because she doesn't understand ceremony. She only understands mimicking it. When Frieren says this aloud, the figure removes her hood and the horns are already in the open before the stolen sword clears its scabbard. This demon's method, the episode reveals, was to ask her victims to pray. Close your eyes, bow your head, and in the moment of false safety, kill them. It is one of the most psychologically precise predator strategies the series has shown, not because of its power, but because of its intimacy. She weaponized the human need to grieve. She used the act of mourning as a trap. She stood in front of destroyed homes and told the survivors it was okay to feel something, and then killed them for feeling it. Frieren ends the fight in seconds. The demon is dead before she finishes the arc of the first spell. The sword is recovered. And then Frieren does something the show lets breathe for a long, quiet moment. She kneels in the ruins and prays for the dead. Not because she believes in the goddess. She never has. She does it because Himmel would have, and because the lives of the people this demon erased deserve to be acknowledged by something more than their killer's indifference. Fern and Stark kneel beside her. No one speaks. The demolished village holds the silence of people it can no longer protect. The sword is returned to Count Doc. The road continues north, and the lesson has been delivered without announcement. In a world where demons wear human faces and exploit human tenderness, the only armor is being the person who sees through it without becoming cold. Frieren has been practicing that balance for 1,000 years. She hasn't mastered it yet. Here is something this show understands that most psychological thrillers don't. The most terrifying thing isn't the monster. It's the moment before the monster, when everything still feels safe. When you're chasing a legendary hot spring through the mountains because a boy wanted to see a place his mentor once mentioned, and nobody has died yet, and nobody knows what's coming. That specific fragility of an ordinary moment that doesn't know it's on borrowed time is what Frieren does better than almost any other anime in recent memory. Episode 3 sends the party sideways into the Etwas Mountains. Stark heard about these hot springs from Aizen when he was young, not because they were impressive, but because Aizen said going there with his companions was a memory he'd hold forever. The springs are cold and underwhelming, nobody cares, because what's really being guarded here isn't a location. It's the idea that some moments, lived fully in the company of the right people, become armor against everything that comes after. The show doesn't tell you this. It just shows you 3 people sitting in a mediocre hot spring at the end of a week-long detour, none of them complaining. Then Stark, in a moment of catastrophic recklessness that he immediately regrets, asks Fern if she wants to go on a date, mostly as a joke. Mostly. Fern does not take it as a joke. She walks out of the room in a slow-building daze, and for the first time in a very long time, she looks like someone who has been completely, utterly ambushed by a person she thought she had completely figured out. Stark, already regretting existence itself, goes looking for Frieren. She is in the water, eating a popsicle, at peace with the universe, and constitutionally incapable of useful romantic advice. It is the funniest scene of the season. It is also quietly terrifying in hindsight, because of what comes next. Episode 4 gives us the date in full. It is a disaster. A beautiful, exquisitely observed disaster. Fern agonizes over which dress to wear and gets no help from Frieren, who thinks both dresses look identical and is primarily concerned about who will braid her hair while Fern is gone. They step outside, and Stark, confronted with Fern in a purple dress with her hair done, freezes completely, his movements literally rendered at a lower frame rate, the show refusing to let you miss his terror. He compliments nothing. He notices the dress, asks why she dressed differently, is informed it is a date, and immediately suggests they walk to the market. The market is where it gets painful in the specific way that only true emotional observation can manage. Fern notices a necklace. She pauses at the display. She looks at it the way people look at things they want but haven't been taught to ask for. Stark, standing beside her, says it probably doesn't have any magical properties and moves on. She puts the necklace back. She watches a man across the market buy one for his wife without being asked, because he noticed she was looking at it, and she carries that image with her for the rest of the afternoon. The date stumbles forward. Steamed buns that are too big, conversations that keep looping back to Frieren because she's the only topic they can agree on, Stark pointing out she's wearing different shoes and making her self-conscious. By the time they reach the observation plaza at the end of the day, the damage seems irreparable. But Fern says it aloud. She points out that the places they visited didn't feel like things Stark would have chosen. And Stark, with the disarming honesty that is the only truly effective weapon in his emotional arsenal, admits that he went to Frieren and asked her to plan a day around everything Fern loves. The necklace was never bought. The date was technically a series of small failures. But the knowledge that Stark went to the one person who knows Fern best in the world and asked for her help not to impress, but to make her happy is what breaks through. A flashback surfaces, Himmel, telling Frieren that even when things don't go perfectly, you can still have a good time if you're spending it with someone you love. Fern, watching the clouds drift over the city, says she's still happy. Stark has no idea what he did right, he just knows she's smiling. The show doesn't give you long to breathe. Off the plateau's edge, a demon has been working through the nearby villages with the methodical precision of something that doesn't fear consequences. The party engages it in the most dangerous fight. Season 2 has shown up to this point a hulking creature with a sword the size of a person, which within seconds cuts through Frieren's standard aerial attacks and closes the distance before Fern can fully raise her guard. The choreography is deliberate about showing you the gap. This is a different class of threat than anything on the southern roads. Stark grapples the creature with his body, pinning it in place at enormous personal cost. while Fern throws up barriers around him and Frieren lines up the finishing shot. They survive, barely, held together by the specific trust of people who have trained to fit inside each other's blind spots. In the aftermath, an exhausted Stark suggests, reasonably, that they could have gone by sea. Frieren tells him that's not what Himmel would have done, because people live on the northern plateau. They call it home. Protecting a place people call home is what adventurers are for. Stark goes quiet. He remembers his own village, what it looked like after. He doesn't say anything. The show doesn't make a speech about it. It trusts the silence to carry the weight. The road north is harder than the road south. They knew that going in. They keep going anyway. There is a theory about grief that this show seems to believe in completely. That the worst thing about loss isn't the losing. It's the way it keeps producing meaning long after the event. The way a dead man's habits become another person's moral code. The way a destroyed village stays destroyed in the mind of the man who couldn't protect it, even after the village itself has been rebuilt. Episode 5, split across two seemingly minor stories, is where Frieren constructs the psychological architecture that the second half of the season will use to break things. A dwarf named Fass has spent 200 years hunting a legendary liquor called Boshaft, said to be the finest drink ever brewed. He is an old drinking companion of Hyder's, which is immediately endearing. He needs Frieren's help to access the ancient vault where the last surviving bottles are kept. She agrees reluctantly, with the expression of someone who already knows something the audience doesn't. And she does. She met the elf who distilled Boshaft centuries ago, who created it on a boring afternoon and saw no reason to refine it further. Boshaft is objectively, completely, irredeemably disgusting. The worst thing anyone in the party has ever tasted. Fass, confronted with the annihilation of his 200-year mission, laughs until his face goes red. He opens a bottle for each of them. They all suffer through it. And he laughs harder. Because the 200 years weren't about the liquor. They were the liquor. The search, the waking up each morning with something to find, the decades of asking questions and following leads, and not yet being at the end, that was the thing that kept him alive and curious and moving forward. The destination was always going to disappoint. The search never could. He has everything he needed. He just didn't know it would taste like this. If you're watching Frieren and you don't feel that moment reaching forward toward Ariel, toward what may or may not be waiting there, what Frieren may or may not be able to say to Himmel's soul, you are not paying close enough attention to what this show is doing to you. The second half of episode 5 involves Frieren being detained by the Norm Trading Company for a debt Himmel's party incurred 80 years ago and never settled. The interest accrued amounts to 300 years of labor. Frieren's response is delivered in her flattest, most matter-of-fact voice. Her journey ends here. She will work it off. She has time. The comedy is perfect, but the resolution is quietly moving. She locates a rich silver deposit in their mines in under an hour, settles the debt in an afternoon, and honors an obligation Himmel left behind with the same practical simplicity with which she honors all things related to him, not with drama. Just with a recognition that it needs to be done, and that she is here, and that she has the ability. It is the shape of love in someone who learned to love too late. Episode 6 ends the comedy era of the season with the efficiency of a door slamming shut. A village on the northern plateau has been destroyed. Not ransacked, destroyed, with the clinical, surgical violence that separates demon attacks from all other kinds of danger. Waiting at the edge of the wreckage are two mages. Genau, a first-class veteran whose expression is the particular blankness of someone who has locked a room inside themselves and swallowed the key. And Method, his newer partner, watching him with the careful attention of someone who has already identified the structural weakness and is waiting to see how long it holds. The demon responsible has a name, Divine Revolt. Genau's home village is gone because of him. His last partner is dead because of him. He presents neither fact to the group. He just stands at the edge of the ruin and stares north, with the eyes of a man who has already decided how this ends for himself. He just hasn't told anyone else yet. The show does not editorialize on this. It doesn't have to. The psychological shape of what Genau is carrying is visible from across the room, and a demon who has spent centuries studying human pain has already seen it too. Divine Revolt is not frightening because he is powerful. He is frightening because he is right. He has spent centuries watching humans with the patience of a researcher and the detachment of someone to whom the outcome is irrelevant, not because he doesn't care about winning, but because he has studied the variable so thoroughly that winning has stopped feeling like a possibility and started feeling like an inevitability. He knows that humans stay to protect their dead. He knows that this impulse, which they call honor or love or duty, is from a purely tactical standpoint a catastrophic, exploitable weakness. He knows that a party that stays together will be a party that defeats him. He knows that if he can make them feel responsible for the dead, they will split, and then there will be nothing left to stop him. In episode 7, he does exactly that. He doesn't announce it, he doesn't monologue, he simply allows the situation to unfold along the lines he already drew. Frieren, Fern, and Methode enter the forest to hunt Revolt. Stark and Ganau stay behind at the village to guard the bodies of the fallen. The division happens naturally, out of respect and moral instinct, and it is exactly what Revolt needed. 2 of his lieutenants emerge from the trees, a broken-horned man who fights with the economy of someone who abandoned passion decades ago, and a woman with katanas who moves with the smooth, thoughtless precision of someone who has performed this particular task too many times to find it interesting. Methode is separated in the chaos. 3 weaker targets where there was 1 strong unit. The trap has closed. Frieren stands very still in the forest and begins to read the situation. Not react to it, read it. This is the distinction that makes her the most dangerous thing on the field. Not the raw depth of her mana, though that is considerable, but the speed and cold clarity with which she processes information that everyone around her is too busy surviving to notice. She has fought creatures like this before. She has fought things far worse. She does not hurry. Episode 8 is titled A Magnificent End. It earns that. 2 battles unfold simultaneously, and the show refuses to let you watch them from a comfortable distance. On one side, Stark and Ganau against Divine Revolt, a fight that is not primarily about magic or swords, but about psychology. Revolt doesn't just fight Ganau, he speaks to him. Quietly, precisely, with a particular intimacy of something that has studied its target's wound and knows exactly which angle of pressure will cause the most damage. Ganau has spent months building a wall around his grief, around the village, around the partner, and Revolt, without raising his voice, finds the hairline crack in that wall and leans on it. For one terrible moment, Ganau falters, not from a spell, from being seen, from being known, in the most invasive possible way, by something that wants to destroy him. Stark does not falter. Stark has never had the option of faltering, because Stark grew up in the wreckage of everything that faltering costs. He keeps moving through the gap left by Ganau's moment of paralysis, not because he isn't afraid, but because the fear has nowhere left to put itself except forward. He finds angles. He puts his body between Revolt and the opening, over and over, knowing with each exchange how vast the gap in power is, buying seconds with the only currency he has. Across the plaza, Fern does something that stops the sequence cold. Halfway through a fight, she is losing on raw ability. Tracked by a demon that has locked onto her mana signature, with casual precision, she simply disappears. Not physically. Her mana signature drops to absolute 0, and she vanishes from the demon's perception as completely as if she never existed in the field. She has suppressed her mana mid-combat, under pressure, without instruction, the way you can only do a thing that has been drilled into your body until it lives below conscious thought. This is the technique Frieren uses. Fern has practiced it until it is hers. She is not following her teacher's footsteps anymore. She is walking in them from memory. And the distance between those 2 things is everything. Revolt is defeated. The arc closes. The show does not linger on the triumph. It acknowledges it and moves on. The way Frieren moves on with the full awareness that the North is still ahead, and what awaits there makes this look like practice. Episode 9 stops the journey entirely. Lake Corridor, the largest lake in the north, is impassable, locked under a winter storm that does not care about urgency or purpose or the fact that Frieren has been trying to reach Ariel for decades. The party waits. Days become weeks. And the show, with the psychological precision of a surgeon selecting an instrument, uses the forced stillness to do the most devastating thing it has done all season. A flashback surfaces, the heroes' party, caught in the same storm on the same lake decades ago. Eisen and Hyder bicker like people who have been trapped together too long. Himmel finds the bright side of everything, not naively, but deliberately, with the specific, focused cheerfulness of a man who has decided that the interior of his life will be warm regardless of what the weather does. Frieren sits among them, indifferent in her bones to the delay, and does not notice that this moment, this ordinary, nothing, forced delay moment, is the kind of thing she will spend the next 100 years wishing she could return to. In the present, no funds. Frieren's spellbook habit has consumed the coin purse, which surprises no one. The ferryman won't move without payment, but he will make a trade. On a sealed island in the middle of the storm-dark lake, in an abandoned monastery, there is said to be Himmel the hero's personal memoir. He has always wanted to read it. He imagines battle records, the strategic genius of the age, documented in his own hand. The party retrieves it, he opens it. It is full of the day Hyder attempted to cook fish and failed catastrophically, of Eisen laughing so hard he knocked over the camp table, of Frieren always walking 10 steps ahead of everyone, her ears upright, pretending with elaborate commitment that she was not enjoying herself, and Himmel watching her and writing it down anyway, because he wanted to remember exactly what she looked like when she forgot to be alone. No battles, no glory. Just the shape of the people he was with, preserved in the medium of what he noticed about them on an ordinary afternoon. As Evancall's score rises underneath this, the full weight of what the show has been building lands with the force of something that was always inevitable. Himmel knew. He knew his life would be short, and he chose every day to pay attention to the people next to him. He wrote it down because he understood, with the clarity that only a finite life can produce, that Frieren would outlive them all and might need, someday, to remember that she was seen, that she was loved in the granular, unremarkable, daily detail of who she actually was, not the legend she would eventually become. The boatman, who expected the memoirs of a conqueror, holds instead the diary of a man who spent his most famous years noticing which of his friends was afraid of the dark and which one pretended not to be. He takes the party across the lake in silence. Episode 10 brings the Great Tor Canyon, a gash in the earth so deep and so wide that even mages cannot fly across it, the headwinds too violent to navigate by air. A 2-week detour on foot is the only other option, but Frieren knows a way. On her first journey through these lands with Himmel's party, she met a dwarf named Gehen, who was building a bridge. He is still building it, 200 years later. His village was wiped out because soldiers couldn't cross this canyon in time to reach them. He has been trying, ever since, to close that gap to ensure that the geography of the world never again becomes the reason someone loses everything. The bridge is complete. It cannot be used because a colony of enormous birds has nested on it and attacks every person who attempts to cross. The exchange is simple. Clear the birds, accept payment. The payment Himmel negotiated in advance, on Gehen's behalf, is a magical tome that teaches you to flip pancakes perfectly. Frieren accepts this without complaint. She collects useless spells. This fits. What doesn't fit, what quietly breaks the episode open, is the detail that arrives at the end. Gehen's village was rebuilt decades ago. His people did not remain scattered or forgotten. They regrouped, they built again, they are alive and growing. Gehen has been constructing this bridge in the architecture of a grief that outlived its cause, driven forward by a guilt that the world he was trying to protect had already quietly resolved without him. He was never as alone as the shape of his loss made him feel. He just never went home to check. The show doesn't shout this. It places it in front of you and lets you do the math. Before the credits roll, a traveler on the northern plateau, helped by the party during an earlier stop, turns to someone beside them and explains why they did a good thing, just like Miss Frieren would have done. Not Himmel, Frieren. The inheritance has passed, without ceremony, without announcement, without her knowledge. The pattern Himmel set by spending 10 years noticing the people around him has reproduced itself. Frieren is now the person other people point to when they want to explain what good looks like. She has no idea this is happening. She is probably, at this exact moment, trying to find a spell that does something completely useless. After the credits, Denkin stands at the edge of his city, first-class mage, veteran, A man who has spent his life knowing exactly where he stands and exactly what he is protecting. He looks out over the streets, the buildings, the people moving through their ordinary evening, and then the gold comes. Not slowly, not gradually, all of it at once. Stone, glass, bodies, breath frozen in a single, absolute instant of glittering silence. An entire city preserved at the moment of its ending, the way an insect is preserved in amber, beautiful and permanent and completely, irreversibly dead. The camera holds on Denkin's face in the last second before it takes him too, and in his expression, there is no surprise. There is only the specific horror of a man who always knew what was coming north and ran out of time to stop it. Season 3 is coming, October 2027. Whatever is at the center of that golden city has been waiting for a very, very long time. And it already knows you're coming.